Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to Ironclad RC. I got a couple of some twin packs here. These packs were sent to me from a subscriber. Thank you, Mild to Wild. But we have to change out the plugs. This is 5200 milliamp ADC Z power packs, and they have an XT90 on the batteries. I've already changed one of them out to an EC5, and I want to show you guys how to solder on an EC5 connector. From what I gather, from what I understand, the EC5s have a little more current flow than the XT90. Could be wrong, and there's probably some debate about that, but this is what I use. These are the connectors I use for all my vehicles, all my boats. So I'm going to show you guys how to solder on an EC5. We got the EC5 here. It comes with the plug and the two female terminals. Let's get to it. We got to get this XT90 plug off. They come with it's a two-part plug. You just kind of pop off this back protective cover here, wiggle it back and forth, and it'll come off for you. See, you just push it back. Now we got to cut off this heat shrink and desolder the wires from the plug itself. Just put a little bit of heat on the back. Don't touch these together. I just put a little bit of heat on the back of the plug there, warm that up. Don't want to overheat it because these plugs here, you can melt the plastic. So you don't want to overheat these, just a little bit at a time. And it'll come right off, see? Don't want to overheat it. And usually it'll just fall off like that. Alright, make sure all my wires are together. Don't want to touch. You don't want them to touch. That's the most important part. It's very dangerous. You could have just a scary little spark, or it could spark and possibly catch the battery on fire. So it could explode on you, but just be careful. Just get your EC5 connector. Make sure you're using the female connector for the battery side, and the male connector for the ESC side. So we've got the female pieces. I'm gonna go ahead and put my heat shrink on first, and then you put your connector on. These connectors here are labeled positive and negative. The flat side's always your positive side. Put your connector on first. Kind of work with one at a time. I use my battery boxes for my little solder caddy. Just kind of convenient for me anyway. Get your solder ready. You see the difference in the plugs? The XT90 has the connector actually, the terminal actually built into the plug itself, and it's just easier. You just kind of solder your wires on, and it's easy. With the EC5, it's a little more complicated. You got 3 actual parts, the 2 terminals, the bullets there, bullet terminals, and your plug. So it's a little more complicated, and what I like to use is these little thin needle nose pliers because they heat up fast. If you use like a real heavy needle nose, it will actually cool the plug down fast, and it's a little harder to work with. Kind of heat up the tip of your pliers a little bit. It carries the heat a little bit better, and your connector don't cool down as fast as with a bigger pair of needle nose. See the size difference? What I like to do is I use this little drill vise right here just to put my battery in so it's not moving around. Alright, so now we're going to actually tin our wire before we put the connector on it. Put your solder on the wire. If you're changing out connectors, 9 times out of 10 they're already tinned from having the plug on. So you just kind of melt some solder onto your wire, tin it up so you get a good contact. Alright, don't want to put too much because it won't fit in your terminal. See how I got my plug pointing down? Now you get your terminal ready. A little bit of flux here. Get the temperature. Melt yourself some solder in your plug. Try not to get it on the outside. Alright. Then you just put your terminal on your wire. Might have to use some heat. And then you just push your wire in and hold it. And that's how you do it. So it should look something like that. See that? Your wire sheath, it's normal. Don't freak out or nothing. Push that into your terminal so you don't ground them out. If you got a little bit of solder on the outside of the terminal, get your little Dremel with a sanding wheel and just knock off the extra solder that was on the outside of your connector. Just kind of clean it up a little bit so it goes in your plug nice and smooth. Alright, just push that in your plug like so. Alright, that way you don't ground them out. Make sure you got your heat shrink on. Make sure it's kind of pointing down. Make it easy on you. A little bit of flux, don't forget the flux. Get your solder ready. I usually just kind of have it pointing down like I said before. Sometimes if you're taking a connector off, you have to re-tin it like I'm doing here. Not quite enough solder on there. You know, you had to heat it up to get your terminal off. It has to be tinned again. Flux on it. A little bit of flux. Now you heat it up. Not too hot, just hot enough to where it starts melting the solder. Just push your terminal onto the wire. Like so. You know, you want them to be up to temperature so that the solders bond to one another. You can't have a cold wire and a hot connector because you might not get a good bond. Alright. Has solder on it. Use the Dremel with the sanding wheel and just knock that extra solder off. Careful not to go through the plug. Yep, just knock the extra solder off until you can fit it in your EC5, and you're done. Star bit like so, and I push in on my connectors, not to push too hard, because you'll push this bullet through the plug, and it's a pain in the butt to get it back. Out of my workbench right here, and I just kind of push in until you hear it click. There's a little notch on the plug in the connector that will click your bullets onto the EC5 like that, and that's how you do it. Heat shrink into the plug itself so you don't have no wire exposed. I like to, when I'm doing my plugs, my connectors, I use the silicone, the heat shrink with silicone on the inside. It'll hold your heat shrink into place and kind of waterproof it. You know, that's why I try to get my heat shrink in the plug. Kind of waterproof the plug. I mean, there's no real way to waterproof it, but at least I tried. And push it up in there. Alright. Like that. A big piece of heat shrink, and the width of it folded in half is about 1.25 inches. And what I do is I'll cut this big heat shrink into like a 1 inch, 3/4 inch section. And then I put it on my connector. This is the actual male plug, and you have female connectors on the inside. So what I do is I push it halfway onto my connector, like so, and it gives you like a little grip when you pull your battery plugs apart. You see that? It'll give you like a grip, so you're not pulling on your wires. You actually pulling on the heat shrink, and it's not really stressing out or pulling the wires out of your connector. I do this pretty much all my batteries and my ESCs, not all of them, but just put it halfway on your connector like that. You see that? So that your connector plugs all the way into your ESC. Shrink it down, and it's like a little added protection. And this has silicone insulation on the inside so that it can waterproof the connector. See that? And it gives you something to hold on to. so you're not like pulling on the wires, you're pulling on the EC5 and the heat shrink and the wires, like all three of them, when you're plugging in and pulling out your battery plug. But that's how you do it. That's how you solder on EC5s. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell to get notified for future videos, future projects. As always, thank you guys for watching. Z Power!